Meet the Matzah, a Passover story. Meet the Matzah. He's just like you, except he's bread. Unleavened bread. No yeast for this guy. That's Alfie Coman. He likes lots of things. He likes to go to the movies. He likes his braided best friend, Hallelujah. And Alfie Coman really likes to hide. It's time for Mrs. Crust's class. Today the students are telling stories about their favorite holidays. Diwali is the Hindu festival of lights. Nancy's story is about the festival of Diwali. Dia de los Muertos is a holiday to remember people who died. Cornelius Tortilla's story tells how his whole tortilla family celebrates the Mexican Day of the Dead. And my story is all about my birthday, shouts Bernie Toast. Mrs. Crust checks her list. Our final story is about the Jewish holiday of Passover. Mrs. Crust scans the classroom. Where is Alfie Coman? Hiding, the students all respond. Alfie Coman, Mrs. Crust calls out with her arms crisscrossed. How many times have I told you, no hiding in class? Sorry, Mrs. Crust. A small voice answers from inside the bookcase. There he is. Chala helps Alfie wiggle out of his hiding spot between the dictionary and the thesaurus. Plop! Thank you, Alfie, Mrs. Crust smiles. We're all excited to hear your Passover story. I'm not. Loaf the sourdough groans. Alfie's stories are always so boring. That's mean, says Cornelius. Yeah, Loaf, the twins Bun and Bun agree. Not nice. Loaf, Mrs. Crust says gently. Perhaps there's a more helpful way you can express yourself. Helpful? Asks Loaf. Great idea, Mrs. Crust. Loaf jumps up from his desk and rushes to the front of the classroom. I'll help Alfie make his story better. Alfie freezes. He looks for a new hiding spot. Nope. Don't worry, Chala whispers. You've got this. But all Alfie's really got is a stomachache. The story of Passover, Alfie begins in a soft, nervous whisper, by Alfie Coman. And Loaf. Alfie starts his story. A long time ago in ancient Egypt, there was a ruthless ruler who enslaved all of the Hebrews. This ruler was evil and wicked, Loaf jumps in, and had sharp pointy teeth and 6 really creepy mincer arms. What? Loaf goes on louder. And this giant, icky ruler's name was the Pharaoh. The students are stunned. Huh? Cool. A roach. Like a cockroach? No way. Not Pharaoh, Alfie corrects Loaf. Pharaoh. He was called Pharaoh. I think you made a mistake, Loaf. But the whole class, and even Mrs. Crust, is on the edge of their seats. Keep going, Bernie Toast begs. A huge cockroach tyrant. This Passover story is wild. See, Loaf chuckles. Not boring. Not true either, says Alfie, as he goes back to telling the real story. And so the Pharaoh. Pharaoh! Fine. Alfie sighs. The Pharaoh made the Hebrew people do all of the hard work. They built his pyramids. They harvested his crops. And they dug him a crazy swimming pool with a twisty water slide, shouts Loaf. Stop him, Alfie. Wait, Loaf. A hand goes up. Actually, 2 hands. Bun and Bun have the same question. But why would the Pharaoh make them do all that? I'll tell you why. Because I said so. That Pharaoh is mean. And bossy. And his swimming pool is creepy. Alfie, says Chala, Loaf is ruining your Passover story. Do something. I am, says Alfie. I'm hiding. Chala grabs Alfie's arm. You can't just hide every time you feel bad. I know. Alfie lets out a deep sigh. But I worked so hard on my story, and Loaf took over. That's what bullies do. Hey, Alfie, Loaf orders. Hit the lights. Alfie is confused. But why? Because I said so, Loaf shouts, leaping on top of Mrs. Crust's desk. Loaf's voice booms through the dark classroom. The Hebrews needed help, and so the call went out for... Suddenly, a huge letter M shines onto the wall. The one, the only, the superhero in sandals. Mighty Moses! No. Yes! Oi! Using all his superpowers, Mighty Moses zipped, zapped, and zoomed into the Pharaoh's palace. "Let my people go, or else." "Or else what?" the Pharaoh cackled. "Or else," Mighty Moses roared, "10 terrible plagues will descend on you and your people." "At least Loaf got the 10 plagues part right," whispers Hala. "I sure hope so," Alfie says. "So did the Pharaoh let the Hebrew slaves go?" everyone asks. "No way," Loaf shouts. "So Mighty Moses unleashed the 10 plagues. No Wi-Fi, early bedtime, birthday clowns, pimples, broccoli for dessert, nightmares, bad haircuts, slug soup, bagpipes, indoor recess, forever. I hate clowns." Alfie's face glows red. "Those aren't the Passover plagues." "Then do something." "Let my story go." Everyone gets quiet, even Loaf. "Listen up." Alfie faces his stunned class. This is the real Passover story. First, there was no giant cockroach. The tyrant was a terrible man called the Pharaoh. And Moses wasn't a superhero. Wait, I can't fly? But he was a hero who spoke up to the Pharaoh and led the Hebrews from slavery to freedom. "How?" Mrs. Crest wonders. "How?" Bernie Toast asks. "Yeah, Alfie, even Loaf wants to know the rest of the real story. How did they get free?" So Alfie continues. Moses warned the Pharaoh that if he didn't free the Hebrews, his kingdom would suffer. Did the Pharaoh listen? Frogs? Bugs? Disease? No way. But after the 10 plagues destroyed all of the crops and livestock and made the Pharaoh's people sick, or worse. "Get out! I told you!" The Hebrews were finally able to flee. Alfie explains, the Hebrews were in such a rush that they didn't have time to let their bread dough rise. The flat, unleavened bread they ate on their exodus from Egypt was Matzah! This way. But it didn't take long for the Pharaoh to change his mind and send his army to catch them. On second thought, catch them! The Hebrews seemed trapped at the edge of the Red Sea. "At least we won't be hungry." Moses prayed for help, and a miracle occurred. The Red Sea parted, and the Hebrew people crossed without harm. And the Pharaoh's army? They chased after the Hebrews, but the Red Sea closed and swallowed them up. Whoa! The whole class agrees. The Passover story is epic. And true, Alfie adds with a smile. Loaf shuffles his feet. He needs to tell Alfie something. "Look, I'm really sorry I messed up your story. I got all bossy and loud, kind of like the Pharaoh, and he was just a big, mean, he was not a cockroach." Loaf smiles. "I was going to say big, mean bully." "Did you really like the Passover story, Loaf?" "You bet," Loaf shouts. "I'd do anything to hear it again." "Me too," says Hala. "Great! You're both invited to my family Seder." Hala interrupts. "But Alfie, you aren't supposed to have bread at Passover." "No problem," Alfie chuckles. "But remember, you both said you'd do anything." Year after year, the story of how the Hebrews escaped to freedom is told at every Passover Seder all over the world. But why is this Passover Seder different from all the other Passover Seders? Because tonight, Alfie Coman is not hiding. Tonight, he is sitting next to a brand new friend. "What a story," says Loaf, reading from his Haggadah. "I know," Alfie whispers. "Wait until you hear about Purim."